Welcome to the Generation Podcast, an audio resource dedicated to a generation of young people who are committed to total surrender to God and total dependence on His power to reach the world with the gospel of Christ. This podcast is designed to strengthen and encourage through a series of Bible-based practical talks.
Welcome to the Generation Podcast. I'm Bobby Bosler, and I'm speaking to you today from Summerville, Alabama, where I and the war team are very excited about what God is setting us up to do here this weekend. We've been out inviting in the neighborhoods and particularly in the schools. God has answered prayer in some pretty exciting ways. Let's see, yesterday, as of the time of my recording, we were in one high school in the town that we're ministering in, and the next town over, we were in that high school as well this afternoon for their lunch periods, and we're just thankful for the way the Lord is opening doors and opening hearts. And if you think of it, on Saturday, let's see, that would be March 25th, pray for us, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, that the Lord would bring many young people here to the war event, and that we would see many trust Jesus Christ as their Savior. For those of you that follow us, you know I've got along with me a team. I've got here this semester Alex Milosevic from the St. Louis area, and I've got Tim Philbrick from Maine, up in Canaan, Maine, near Clinton, Bangor, kind of that general region. And I'll tell you what, these folks are growing. These fellas, they're taking steps of faith. God is teaching them many, many things. God is not only teaching them lessons of character and lessons of faith, He's teaching them what it means to die to self and to expect much, not from their own capabilities, but from God's. And, that's a little bit of what I want to talk about to you here today on the podcast. One of the things God's been working in my heart about is this. So here I am. I'm the guy that's done this before, right? I'm the leader of the war. I'm the guy that, heads up The Generation and is one of the speakers on the Generation podcast. I run the Generation Youth Summit. And young people, I'm sure many of you probably think I've got it all figured out. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I don't. And when I think I do, that's when God is setting me up for a lesson in humility. Just last week, we were in a church we had been in before. We were in Winder, Georgia. And, I was really excited. The Lord was using me. I had gone into a lunchroom there with the guys. I'd gotten a bunch of recruits. I texted a bunch of them, had a lot of my own recruits come out and get saved at the war, which is exciting for me. A lot of times I'm leaning on the guys to do the inviting and the recruiting, but I was involved. The Lord very clearly led me to be involved there, and it was just exciting to see souls saved as a result of it. But in the midst of all of this, God is bringing me into situations where I don't know what to do. For me, one of the things that I found myself experiencing over the last couple of weeks was my truck. It was giving me major problems. For those of you that are aware, God has promised us a new truck. It hasn't been delivered yet, and we haven't gotten the money for it yet. And we haven't ordered it yet. We don't know where it's coming from yet, other than from the hand of the Lord. And so in the meantime, God has been keeping our truck running. It's a 2001 F-350, 7.3 liter diesel dually, 8-foot long bed crew cab truck. And man, that 7.3 liter engine has been bulletproof. Well, until a couple weeks ago, because you see, my team, we done all of our training in the Greenville, South Carolina area. And we were driving to our first meeting, and I noticed the truck sounded funny. Couldn't put my finger on it at first, but all I knew is partway through the trip, the transmission temperature gauge was starting to get higher and higher and higher. And we stopped for lunch, and it cooled down. But then we made the rest of the trip. It got higher and higher and higher. And I say all of that to say I realized there's something wrong. Something is not okay. And I talked to the pastor. He had done a lot of done a lot with trucks over the years, and he recommended I get a transmission fluid change. So we tried that. We kind of tried to fiddle with that, and next travel day, it was doing the same thing. Same of different kind of a sound, and the sound was like the RPMs were going really high. And again, the transmission temperature gauge was going higher and higher. It even got hotter than the week before. And I figured I could slow down and kind of manage the temperature by just not going the speed limit, which that was no fun. We made it to the church, thankfully. But even along the way, I was calling up friends. I got a diesel mechanic friend. I've got another friend who's done a lot with these trucks, and they're saying, try this, try this, try this. Maybe it's this, could be this. And I'll tell you what, we couldn't figure it out. We could not figure it out. And I thought, I need professional help. And so I called ahead to the pastor, and the pastor contacted a diesel mechanic, and we got it in the shop a day or so after we arrived. And the diesel mechanic, he's calling me, and he's not sure what the problem is either at first. He hadn't put his finger on it, and I appreciated him communicating, but I'm going to tell you what, that put me in a bit of a tizzy, a bit of a crisis. I was feeling very anxious. I was thinking, man, this guy's going to call me up and tell me it's a $3,000-$4,000 repair. It needs a whole new transmission. And I'm thinking, we don't want to pour much more money into this truck. We need a new truck. And yet, as I was looking at the trucks on the market, I don't have the money for one. And if it's used, the interest rates are through the roof. And if it's new, the payments are through the roof. And I'm just thinking, oh, Lord, I do not know what to do. And so, thankfully, he figured out what the problem was. And it was just one little switch, a little brake light switch that I had swapped out because my brake lights had stopped working before we went on our first trip. And who would have thought that a brake light switch would result in what was happening was the transmission was not locking up into overdrive, which you want it to do at certain speeds. And so it was riding hotter than it was supposed to. It was an easy fix. Honestly, that fix itself, there was another thing that he did for me, but that fix itself probably cost me $50, maybe if that, for his time and the diagnosis and all of that stuff. But I find myself in certain areas of my life where it's like I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to find a new truck. I don't know how to manage all of, the payments and looking for the right truck. And, I'm familiar with Fords, but I have no clue when it comes to Chevys or Dodges, which engines to choose and which engines to avoid, and just felt very, very overwhelmed. And looking to the Lord and saying, God, I need wisdom. God, I need your help. God, help. And you know what? That's a good thing. It's a good thing to be in a position where you don't know what to do, where you've never experienced some of these things before, and you find yourself at the end of your wits and not knowing where to turn and what to do, because that is when we look to the Lord. And young people, don't run from those kinds of situations. Don't resist things that you've never done before. Don't conclude that you can't do it, at least in the way where you don't even try. Don't hold back because you feel incapable of doing something that God has clearly placed in front of you, or an unavoidable situation. Don't resist that, because listen, if you refuse, you're going to miss out on a miracle. And I've talked about some of those things on the podcast before. But you know what I'm finding? What I'm finding in my own life and in my own ministry, the areas of unfamiliarity, the areas where I feel my need the most, the areas where I've not yet experienced God's major deliverance, those are the areas where God shows up. Those are the areas where I'm aware of my need, and I look away to the Lord for his direction, for his guidance, for his help, and for his deliverance. But it's in the areas that I have experienced sometimes that's where I fail. Okay, so last week we're in Winder, Georgia, right? So this is northeast of Atlanta by about an hour or so. And we're here, and I tell you what, on the first night, everything was going wrong. I'm telling you, we had a lot of my recruits come. That was exciting. But when we got down onto the field, the sound system wasn't ready. Again, this is just a learning curve. The guys had put it down with air, but they hadn't plugged it in, and the cord at the top of the hill wasn't plugged in. And so I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to get this thing ready. And, I call the teens down, and they come down, and I'm explaining the rules. In my brain, I could not shift my brain into gear for some reason. And so I forgot to mention a few rules here, and those rules happen to kind of make a difference in the way things panned out, and it was chaotic. And I've never had more tube tug rounds that ended in a stalemate as I had that night. And it was cold, and I don't know, the kids there was an unsettled spirit. We get inside, and I'm not even joking, during the cheering contest, one of the judges accidentally knocked one of the scoreboards, and the thing fell off, and we couldn't get it back on. And I eventually grabbed both the scoreboards, and I sat them on the ground because I didn't want one down and the other up. But then we get around to the final score, and I had to have some guys from the back come up and hold the scoreboards. How cheesy is that? Oh, I'm telling you, it was like everything was going wrong. And even in an area where I'm familiar with, in my heart, I'm just like, God, help. Well, I got up to preach, and I felt I had nothing. I felt like I had nothing. And the pastor even remarked later, he said, "Yeah, Brother Bosler, about a quarter of the way through your sermon, something happened. It wasn't anything I changed, but about a quarter of the way through that sermon, God was there. It was as if you could see it in the crowd. They went from listening to locked in. Went all the way through the message. At the end of the message, 10 young people walked back and trusted Christ as their Savior. And that kind of thing never gets old. And the reason why I mention that is because, even though that was an area I was familiar with, God was bringing me to a point of discomfort so that I looked away to him. But the second night was very different. And by very different, I meant I remembered all the rules. Even though it was raining outside and there were challenges, we had it under control. The guys did great. They just did phenomenally in leading their teams. We had great team spirit. We came inside, and oh man, everything was just clicking on all cylinders. The program was running really well. And I got around to the sermon, and I cried out to the Lord. Don't get me wrong. I know I need God, but you know what? I've also done this 1,000 times, And I get around to the preaching, and I'm telling you what, when I started preaching, I don't know what came over me. I was a ham. The kids were loving it. I was loving it. I was preaching, and I was funny, and I was making the points so clearly. And the sermon was just going great. At least that's how I felt. And I'm not being down on the sermon necessarily, but I remember at one point I had this twinge in my heart. I had this twinge in my mind. Too much Bobby. Too much Bobby. Oh, I've been there before. I've been there numerous times throughout the years. And I kept preaching. I finished the sermon, gave an invitation. A couple people went back. Maybe one or two. I think it may have been two. And the contrast between those two nights for me was a stark contrast. I know how to run a war night. I know how to preach the gospel. I know how to tell stories. I know how to put together a persuasive sermon. But good night, that's not what it takes to see people saved and to see God come down. I came out of that night. Again, I've been here before. The Lord has taught me this lesson. I wish I wouldn't have to learn this lesson anymore, but the Lord in my heart was speaking to me just this very simple word of scripture from John 3 and verse 30. He must increase, but I must decrease. Young people, all of us are expected to grow. All of us are expected to, in circumstances that are beyond us, to look away from ourselves to the Lord, and in humility to yield to him and submit to him, surrender to him, depend upon him. And he comes and he helps and he delivers and he guides and he does the work that we can't do. And you know what? We grow and we learn that God can, and we learn that God will if we yield to him and depend upon him. Total surrender, total dependence. You guys have heard this a million times by now. Okay. And we grow, and you know what? We grow in our experience. We grow in our expectation. We grow in our maturity. We grow in wisdom, and in so many different ways we grow. And we go from being an immature, timid, cowardly, fearful, clinging Christian to being one who knows how to access the power of God to do the will of God, and we ought to grow like that. But young person, there is a danger in growth. And the danger is when we get our eyes off of the one who made us grow in the first place to the one who delivered us in the first place. And when we get our eyes onto our experience. Young person, maybe some of you one day will become an evangelist like me and get a chance to preach the gospel to dozens, if not hundreds of people at a time. And maybe some of you are going to fail early on and learn how much you need God in the pulpit, and you're going to look away to him and he's going to deliver you. But you know what? I hope there are going to be some, if not many of you, that do this a lot. That in whatever method or mode of ministry he leads you into, that you are going to see God work regularly. But beware of the day when you think you've got it all figured out. Beware of the day when you think you know what you got to do in other people's lives. Beware of the day when you feel like you are the answer, or at least you have the answer. Boy, I tell you, and again, my guys are doing great, don't get me wrong. But, you know, with every team, I've got goals. I've got things that I want them to learn. And I've done this a lot. I've had dozens and dozens of guys travel with me, and I've seen them learn these lessons over and over and over again. And it's so easy for me to think I know what they need. And there's a sense in which I know where I really believe we need to go. And I know sometimes some of the processes involved, but I am not the answer. And no matter how many times I've said the same exact things to my guys, the things that I say are not the answer. Jesus is the answer. The answer isn't, yes, I want them to run to their recruits. Yes, I don't want them to pass up a single recruit. Yes, I want to see them learn how to give the spiel and to do it fast. I want to see them walk into a lunchroom and come out with 75, 100 names and numbers. Yes, I want them to believe God for those things. But my counsel, my input, my direction, my guidance is not the answer. Jesus is the answer. He's the answer for me in my leadership. He's the answer for them in their growth. But the great danger of growth is when you have grown so much to the point that you think you are now the answer, or you think that the answers that you give to them are the answers. I don't care how much you know. I don't care how much theology you've got. I don't care how many sermons you can preach. I don't care how many people have been saved through your ministry. I don't care how many people you have under your tutelage. Jesus is the answer, not you. And I suppose what God is speaking to me about here, even recently, is that he must increase and I must decrease. If my guys walk away from my tour thinking, man, Mr. Bosler's great, oh, I failed. I have failed. But if my guys walk away from this tour thinking, Jesus did amazing things, that's the stuff right there. You know, as you grow, you need to grow. You need to grow. You got to grow. Young people, you got to grow. You got to step out of the boat and experience God. But you know what? Think about this. You step out of the boat a bunch of times, right? You might get kind of confident. Confidence in the Lord is a good thing. But you might turn around and say, hey, guys, watch this. Jump out of the boat and maybe Jesus will help you. Maybe you'll walk on the water. But the moment you say, hey, look, here's how you do it. Look at me. Oh, don't get their eyes on you. Don't let them get their eyes on you. He must increase. I must decrease. Oh, young people. If you in your mind and in your heart have a vision of success in the ministry where you are the guru, where you are the one that everyone seeks out for wisdom and for guidance and for direction, your eyes are on the wrong place and you got the wrong goal. I can't tell you how many times, even here this semester, God has been humbling me and teaching me the greatest thing I can do is point them to Jesus. He's the answer for them. And if they're looking to me for answers, I'm not pointing them in the right place. The danger of growth is that we grow to the point that we become the focus in our own hearts and in our own lives and in the lives of those that we are leading. So young people, I trust that as you learn that Jesus is the answer for you, that you will learn how to point other people to Jesus as the answer for them. That's the whole point of total surrender. It's not like those words, total surrender, are the magic words that makes you a guru. No, the point is surrendering to a person. His name is Jesus. He's God. He knows everything. He knows the best for you. He knows the best plan for right now, for 5 minutes from now, for an hour from now. The point is not surrender. The point is Him. Total dependence, likewise. The point is not that this is some formula that gives you supernatural strength like a superhero, okay? The point is not that this is the magic key and secret to becoming a pastor of a church of 1,000 or an evangelist who sees thousands of people come to Christ. The point is the one to whom you're yielding has a mission for you and you can't do it. The point is His power, His strength, His blessing, His will. The point is Him. He is the point. Jesus is not only the means of Christian growth, He's the point of Christian growth. And so young people, as we yield to Him and as we lead others to do the same, as we depend upon Him and lead others to do the same, may it be said of us, as John the Baptist said of himself, He must increase, but I must decrease.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Generation Podcast. If you've been blessed or helped in any way by this episode or any other episodes, please consider sharing what God has done in your life. Your testimony could be exactly what someone else needs to take their own step out of the boat. To share your testimony, please visit thegeneration.org/testimony. That's THEEgeneration.org/testimony.